Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Friday, October 17th, 2025, making this the news and events for Thursday, October 16th, day 1331 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv, coming to you live from this major European capital, currently under siege. Hey, Richard Prexis. Hey, Kath Brown. Hey, Herb. Hey, Lars. Lars, I changed my mind. I was talking to Lars earlier. Hey, Dino. Hey, Bernard. I feel like shit, Bernard. I got to tell you. I woke up this morning with no voice. Hey, Yankee. Hey, Chef Deb. I woke up this morning with no voice. I'm all congested. I'm coughing. I've got a fever. Like it's cold and flu season, and I am sick as a dog. That's just the reality. So we'll see how far we get through this thing. And I was going to take tonight off. I told Lars, there's no way I'm doing a live tonight. I told Nightshade, there's no way I'm doing a live tonight. But guys, I got to tell you, the news today is so good, and there is so much of it that I didn't see how I could take the night off. Wait until you hear everything that's going on. We are clearly at a critical inflection point in this war. The tide is going out. The tide has turned, and it has turned very strongly in favor of Ukraine. The kind of things that we have been predicting for years are finally coming into reality, are coming to pass. And it is, well, like I said, right? Seriously, I'm sick as a dog. I should be in bed, but I can't help myself. I can't help myself. There is too much good news. Now, I forget who it was last night that began this avalanche of good news, and I'm sorry I can't remember. But somebody last night asked about protests in St. Petersburg, and I didn't know anything about protests in St. Petersburg, so I talked about the protests I knew about in Vladivostok, right? Or that was Wednesday, actually. That was Wednesday evening. Or Tuesday. I'm sorry, whenever it was. I can't remember who said it. But they asked about protests in St. Petersburg. And there was, in fact, a protest in St. Petersburg yesterday. Bunch of kids, apparently mostly young folks, were out in the street singing a song by a guy who goes by the rapper name of Noise MC, spelled Noize, Noise MC. Now, this guy is a Russian rapper who's opposed to the war in Ukraine, who is in exile in Lithuania. And he wrote a song back in 2022, an anti-war song called Cooperative Swan Lake. Now, for anybody that's followed Russian history, or USSR history, if you grew up in the Cold War like I did, you remember when, why can't I think of his name? Brezhnev died. Then what was his name? Not Yanukovych. Yeah. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There was a series of leaders of the Soviet Union who died. And when they died and the Kremlin was in turmoil trying to figure out what to do next, because these people don't have a line of succession, Andropov, thank you. He was one of the three I'm thinking of. Yeltsin, I think. No, it wasn't Yeltsin. It doesn't matter. But when these guys kicked the bucket, and the Kremlin, who doesn't have a line of succession because they don't engage in a peaceful transfer of power, these fuckers, what they put on Russian state TV was Swan Lake. And it was intended to calm the population, right? And so his song is a reference to political disruption inside of Russia. That's what the song is about. And so they were singing this anti-war protest song by this Russian rapper who is currently in exile in Lithuania. Now, it is worth pointing out that the leader of the sing-along was arrested. A younger woman. We have no word yet on whether or not she's going to be charged or what she's going to be charged with. Which is interesting to me that in Russia, you can be arrested with no charges, right? Like in the United States, that's not well, it was never a thing before. Now, I guess it is a thing. Thank you, Donald Trump. The ultranationalists and the state media condemned these protests, of course. And yet they went on. They went on. It did happen. Even though, again, the leader of the protest was arrested. Now, this comes against the backdrop of pro-Kremlin. Now, the other day, we were talking about Russian economists predicting the recession that's coming and the slowing of the Russian economy. Now, in pro-Kremlin mouthpieces like Soliev are increasingly having to admit that Ukraine is not collapsing as they've been saying it's about to for 3.5 years. Soliev said there is no exhaustion in sight. Ukraine is not collapsing. He said those exact words. He said we underestimated Ukraine's military capabilities and resistance. He said that Russian strikes were ineffective. What have I been saying every night? That every one of these strikes on civilian targets only strengthens the Ukrainians' will to never again live under the yoke of Russian oppression. It's not going to happen. This is the big one. Soliev recognized Ukraine's defense industry has grown and is stronger now than it was 3 years ago. Now, this is quite an admission from a guy who's been telling his audience for 3.5 years that Ukraine is done, that it's about to collapse, when clearly nothing of the sort is happening. Nothing of the sort is happening. Now, Soliev makes these comments, and as if on cue, the government here in Kyiv, the budget office, released new numbers of spending on military hardware by the government. So, after Soliev's reluctant confessions, as if on cue, the Kyiv government released budget data that from January to June 2025 showed that 71.4% of weapons purchases were from domestic sources. 71.4%. There they are. Chernenko? Wow, I don't even remember that name. But those are the three, Brezhnev, Andropov, and Chernenko. Okay, now. So what Kyiv is saying is that the industrial base here in Ukraine has multiplied multiple times in the last 3.5 years, despite this crucible of war, despite having no advantages in this thing. This increase to 71.4% is an increase of $3.6 billion over last year at the same time. This is up from 10% in 2022, 35% in 2023. And Zelensky acknowledged this multiplication, this multifold increase in domestic defense production and projected an astounding 35 billion in drone and missile production for 2026, for 2026. I mean, that's an incredible achievement. Think about how, in the midst of a full-scale invasion, nightly bombings, you've been able to increase this, or create a decentralized defense industry that is now fueling the war in ways that I don't think anybody could have predicted 3.5 years ago. With strike drones dominating the battlefield and naval drones denying the Russians the seas, Zelensky emphasized plans to begin regular use of Ukrainian long-range ballistic missiles. Now, what have we been talking about on this channel? We've been talking about the fact that we are at an evolutionary inflection point in Ukraine's ability to prosecute this war. The movement from long-range drone strikes inside Russia into long-range missile strikes. And those missile strikes are far more likely to be successful because we have all the long-range drone telemetry. I think that's what's coming next, Mighty Mac. The Flamingos are coming, along with the Polonitsas, the Peklos, and the ballistic missiles, the Hrims. Production is ramping up of all of these. And when Ukraine feels it's got enough, it's going to unleash them on Russia. And the damage that they will do to Russian energy infrastructure is heads and shoulders beyond anything that drones could do. I see June is here. June is a sponsor of tonight's live. Everybody thank June, please. June, guys, I am not feeling better. I'm so fucking sick today. But as I'm lying in bed looking at the news today, there is so much good news. There are so many things happening that I couldn't go to sleep and not do tonight's live. It's just one thing after another. Now, this first bit here, the protests in Moscow, which demonstrates it's J-O-O-N, everybody. J-O-O-N, June. Though he's not Korean. June is like Smith in Korea. Or Park. Anyway. Or Kim. Thanks, McNally. Then we have all this good news about Ukrainian defense production. But that is just the beginning. I am reminded of what Sarah Payne says. Do you know who Sarah Payne is? She's a lecturer at the U.S. Navy College. She's an expert on World War II. She's a brilliant, insightful woman. And she makes the point in her lectures that it is alliances that win wars. It's alliances that win wars. And while Russia is fighting against the whole world is supporting Ukraine. And that makes all the difference. Ukraine has the partnerships with Poland, with Lithuania, with Germany, with Denmark, resulting in a decentralized industrial production capacity that Russia cannot hope to match. No, Russia's nowhere near taking Donetsk. Actually, they're getting slaughtered in Pokrovsk right now. Not only did Ukraine produce 2.5 million artillery shells locally last year, as many more were produced in other countries, which means if Russia does manage to hit a military industrial site in Ukraine, production can fail over to other production lines either in the country or outside of the country. a capability that Russia cannot match. In the crucible of this war, Ukraine has gone from complete dependency on their allies to self-sufficient production, expanding international facilities, and expansive long-range weapons. All unlike Russia, who is bleeding under sanctions and Ukrainian drone strikes. Make no mistake, Ukraine is winning this war and Russia is losing. And today's news bucket confirms it. On the subject of alliances, while Putin has to beg the new leader of Syria to try to keep his bases alive in Syria, the rest of the world is stepping up to help Ukraine. The pledges coming out of the Ramstein meeting yesterday include Britain and Ukraine will co-produce 2,000 interceptor drones a month moving forward. Half of all NATO countries have signed up to the prioritized Ukraine requirements list, which is the list of weapons that Ukraine needs the most, which they can purchase from the United States. Finland has made a commitment to join the Pearl Initiative. Lithuania pledged another 30 million to the Pearl Initiative, on top of the Netherlands, 104 million, Norway's 6.8 billion, and Germany's $2.3 billion package of air defense, Patriot interceptors, and Iris-T ammunition, along with advanced guided weapons and ammunition for Ukraine. Fucking hell yeah, go Norway is right. Okay. Even Pete Hegseth, the self-proclaimed Secretary of War, was saying the right things in Brussels at the meeting of NATO defense ministers, where basically he insisted that if Russia would not end its war, the U.S. was prepared to let Europe buy all the weapons for Ukraine. All the weapons. Whiskey breath Hegseth. I like Keg's breath personally. I think that it's funny. Anyway. All of this good news out of the Ramstein contact group and the meeting of defense ministers of NATO comes as Zelensky is en route to Washington to meet with Trump. Now, look, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up with Trump, because a Tuesday Trump can be very different from a Thursday Trump, right? But he's a DUI hire. Oh my God, that's a riot. So a Thursday Trump can be very different from a Tuesday Trump. I think we all know that. So we don't want to get our hopes up too much. But he is saying and doing the right things. So we're hopeful about the Trump meeting, and we'll talk about some details of that coming up here in a second. But first, this is all happening while, according to the Ukrainian armed forces, Russia has now lost more than 1,000 military personnel every day for the last 11 days. That comes as Russia Insider magazine stated that new contracts for the SMO fell to a new low of 37,400 for all of Q2. From April through June, the Russians managed to sign up less than 13,000 men a month. And they're losing 13,000 men every 13 days. That is not sustainable. That is not sustainable. And it is certainly good news for the Ukrainians. That, of course, comes right on the heels of the news that 8 Russian regions have dropped their signing bonuses from 3 million rubles apiece to 800,000 rubles apiece, less than a third. Now, if you weren't getting enough guys at 3 million rubles sign-on bonus, how do you think that's going to affect your conscription rates? They're going to drop. Now, can we trust these Ukrainian numbers of 1,000 men a day, right? We always say take the numbers with a pinch of salt. But I have long suspected that because the Ukrainians demand on evidence of losses, that these losses are underreported. And now today we have real evidence of that. A leaked Russian document from the MOD for September 4th, 2025, details the number of Russian soldiers lost, KIA, WIA, POW, and MIA in Ukraine. The Ukrainians said that it gave a number for September 4th of 840 personnel lost in the war. The Russian documentation says it was 1,370. Over 530 more personnel than Ukraine reported. I got a buddy in LA who made his entire career and paid his rent and bought his apartment playing a Borg on the Star Trek TV series and in the TV movies. And he played other like alien characters too, like Ferengi #1 and shit like that. So anyway, what I'm suggesting here is that if Ukraine could be off by 530 men a day on one day in September of 2025, how many more Russians have been lost? The official Ukrainian estimate right now is 1,127,000. Could that number be closer to 2 million? I mean, if this is just one day, of course, we can't extrapolate that to all, but the number is much bigger. Now, on the subject of oil, because that's where Trump really comes up here. Trump is saying all the right things. Now, we don't know whether he's going to follow through, and we don't know what China and India will do. But he is claiming that he spoke to Narendra Modi, and that India is going to stop buying Russian oil. If that is true, that is a death blow to the Russian economy. A death blow. The two largest buyers of Russian oil today are China and India by a long sight, right? China buys slightly more oil than India, but the next guy in line, Brazil, buys only 20% of what India buys. To lose India and China will destroy the Russian economy. And Trump is threatening 500% tariffs on China if they do not stop buying Russian oil. And it does appear that at least the Indian state refiners are stopping their purchases of Russian oil. And that accounts for about 60% of the refining capacity inside India. In terms of strikes on Russian infrastructure, we saw Ufa, the refinery in Ufa, hit again. Nizhny Novgorod was hit again. The Lukoil facility in Nizhny Novgorod, the hydro treatment unit was hit, which means if there was any damage done to it, no diesel production. No diesel production. And an army runs on diesel. The Saratov oil refinery was hit again last night. We don't have a damage assessment, but we know that it sparked disruption at Engels Air Force Base, All the jets were scrambled to get them out of harm's way, and they weren't allowed to return to the flight deck until the drones were cleared from the skies. They had the all clear. 4 days since the last strike on Feodosia, and it's still burning. So the Feodosia marine oil terminal in Crimea is the oil terminal for supplies of gasoline, diesel, kerosene, aviation fuel, and fuel oil to the Crimean Peninsula. At the beginning of the war, there were 34 of those big 2,000 metric ton tanks. Today, there are 6. 6. The Ukrainians burned 16 of those tanks in the last week. They burned another 12 last year, right? So that brings them down to 6 tanks. The terminal is basically out of business now. There's no way, there is no alternative mechanism for supplying Crimea with fuel oil, gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel. This is a death knell for Crimea as a place where the Russians can continue to operate from. This is huge, huge news. 3 more regions entered fuel crisis today inside Russia. That means that fully 2/3 of Russia is now experiencing a major fuel crisis, or is now affected by these hits. It's not all good news. It's mostly good news. Here's the one piece of bad news today. The Russians are pushing on Kupiansk so much that the Ukrainian authorities have instituted a mandatory evacuation notice for 40 villages in the Kupiansk sector for families with children. If you are a family with children, you are ordered to leave the region now. And so that's unfortunate. Joking the girl from nowhere. That's a good question. We've seen some large mechanized assaults absolutely decimated in Pokrovsk, in Dnipropetrovsk, and now in Minrograd. Just today, there's a large mechanized assault hitting Minrograd, and it appears as though the Ukrainians are devastating it. So I'm not entirely certain what the mechanism of the advance in Kupiansk is. It's a good question. I'll have to take a look for tomorrow. In Sumy, now we talked about this the other day, whenever that was. We talked about this, that in Oletsky, the Ukrainians were moving forward. The Russian mill bloggers today are acknowledging that the frontline positions in Oletsky have collapsed and that the Russian forces that are there need to withdraw. So Oletsky looks like will fall. Now that means that the whole Sumy incursion from this summer is a failure, and that the Russians have been pushed back to the state border, or are in the process of being pushed back to the state border, even as we speak. In Dobrapilla, the Russians that are surrounded are just trying to survive at this point. They are in survival mode. And the odds are slim to none, and Slim is out of town. In the southwest of Pokrovsk, the Russians claim, this comes from Russian sources, we can't know for sure, but the Russians claim that the Ukrainians have flooded all the sewer tunnels, or sealed the sewer caps, or covered them in construction debris, meaning that Russians that are trying to infiltrate the city through the sewers, which they've been doing, are no longer able to do that. So, again, guys, look, I'm sick as a dog. right? I got a fever. I'm all congested. I had no voice this morning when I woke up. But the news today is just one good news story after another. We're looking, all of the things that we've been saying for 3.5 years. The protests in Moscow yesterday, singing the song, right, calling for Putin's death. The coming economic collapse of Russia, it's all in sight. The frontline failures of the Russian army, the second best army in Ukraine, are writ large for the world to see. Russia is losing. Ukraine every day is stronger than it has ever been before. Its alliances are deeper and more meaningful than they have ever been before. It is a day of rejoicing. Well, I'm just going to sleep in this weekend, Clive. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I've got ginger tea right now, ginger and lemon, Colin. And I actually roasted some heads of garlic. I ate a whole head of garlic with my lunch today. So I think that's sound advice. It's an antiviral garlic, right? So it's such a great day. I couldn't not do this. Yeah, I mean, it's too good. So I want to thank June, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. I want to thank all of you for being in here. Lars for the Discord server, Nightshade for the Peters Peeps group, and of course, the moderators, best moderators on the Tickety Talk. So, questions, comments. What did I miss? What other good news did you hear that I missed? Oh yeah, this tea is loaded with honey. Honey, lemon, garlic, not garlic, ginger. Oh yeah, it's great, Leo. Thanks for pointing that out. That makes me feel wonderful. Well, he's not really visiting Europe. He's visiting Hungary, right? So word came out today that it looks like maybe Trump is going to go to Hungary to meet with Putin. That's the worst. Thanks, Ezra. So we don't know more tax money. This is the kind of thing that people say who don't have any idea how the world works. They have no idea how the world works. Look at what's happening in Poland right now, right? I don't know if they even sell NyQuil in this country. But anyway, look at what's happening in Poland and NATO right now. NATO didn't do anything to close the skies over Ukraine. So now Russia's sending drones into Poland. And so what's NATO doing? They're flying F-35 fighter jets every single day, 24 hours a day, all along the NATO border. Do you have any idea what that costs? Do you have any idea what that costs? It would have been way cheaper to send Ukraine the weapons that they fucking needed. The tax dollars. People that have no idea how the world works say stupid things like that. Alan, that's a great question. How will Putin get to Hungary? It's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Oh, Roy Daniels, the Secret Service doesn't have a say in anything anymore. Trump is in charge. If he wants to go to Orban's Hungary, he's going to go to Orban's Hungary. So, and him and Orban are friends. Well, Chrissy, I think you're always right to be skeptical of Trump. That's my opinion. So we will see. We will see what happens tomorrow. Zelensky knows how to handle Trump. He really does. He really, really does. Hey, Van. Right, exactly, Chef Deb. Ridiculous. Putin dead in Cape Idacopus? I don't know what that's about. Prime. I have no idea what you're talking about. But I do know that anybody that calls me Uncle Peter is a Russian troll. What, are you out of the Petersberg office? I hear I'm a legend up there. Is Hungary a signatory to the ICC? I don't know. That's a great question. Ukraine has offered a Flamingo air ticket to Putin. Nice. Can they still get Tomahawks, or will it be a small amount of lesser missiles? It's only going to be 20 to 50 Tomahawks anyway, right? Like, that's all that DC is talking about, is 20 to 50 Tomahawks. So it's not like the Tomahawks are going to be a big game changer. But they are a lot harder to shoot down than the Flamingos. Used in combination with the Flamingos, it will guarantee, I think, hits. It will overwhelm drones, Flamingos, and Tomahawks together. Will overwhelm Russian air defenses and ensure that critical targets at distance are damaged or destroyed. And I think that's what we're going to see. Sean Stack says, could Putin be in Hungary already? Don't know. I don't know where we never know where he is. Hey, Kennedy. Hey, Van. He has, Chrissy. Zelensky does know how to massage Trump's ego. No, Michael, I feel like shit. I got a fever. I'm congested. I'm coughing. But there was so much good news today, I couldn't not do this. I am normal US of a common Joe. Thanks, FDL. Don't need Tomahawks, need Patriots. Need both. Right? One for offense, one for defense. Britain don't have the weapons. I don't know what you're talking about. Britain is co-producing 2,000 interceptor drones a month in combination with the Ukrainians. When is this war over? Nobody knows. Shouldn't Europe give more money to the Flamingo Project since we can't trust the clown in the U.S.? Europe's ponying up a bunch of money. I went through the list tonight of all the commitments made coming out of the Ramstein group. And that amounts to what? Something like $10 billion? 10 billion US? A little bit more. And that's just what came out of the Ramstein meeting. Is Putin panicking? He needs to get out before it's worse for him. Psychopaths don't panic. So he's not panicking. I don't believe. I think he's looking for a way to wiggle his snake ass out of it. Since June 2025, Hungary withdrew from the ICC. Thank you, Edwin. Edwin can use the Google. That's just true, Sarge. Somebody up at 55 Shaga Gaga Baga Buga Street in St. Petersburg started calling me Uncle Peter, and it's really taken. Where is Putin? Which of the 7 Putins? Are they scattered everywhere? Exactly. Who knows? Hey, how did you know 7? Because the Japanese only identified 3, right? Putin doubles. But it was a retired colonel from the HUR here in Kyiv who told me she thought that there were 7, or that the Ukrainian intelligence believed that there were 7. Did I say that? I probably said that somewhere. Ha! I don't know of a more offensive weapon than the people of Great Britain. You're right, Anthony. Hey, Kansas Steve, how you doing, buddy? It's a day full of good news, pal. It's a day full of good news. Yes, it is. Yes, Ukraine will retake Crimea. There's just no 2 ways about that. And in fact, today we reported on the fact that the marine oil terminal at Feodosia, the main supply hub of gasoline, diesel, fuel oil, kerosene, aviation fuel to the peninsula, is now down from 34 working tanks to 6 maximum. Could be 4. We're waiting we're waiting for the fire to go out so we can get satellite images. Boy, that guy I accused of being in St. Petersburg, he went quiet, didn't he? Huh. They have done so much with so little for so long. The Ukrainians are now equipped to do anything with nothing. Michael Evans is touting the skills of the British SAS, which I don't know what SAS stands for. Special something services, special armed services, something like that. But, it's like our Navy SEALs, our elite kind of troops with all the skills. Six too many. If they can get to the other. Well, Judy, the thing is, if you can't get any fuel to the peninsula, Special Air Services, thank you, Roy. If you can't get any fuel, how do you maintain 21st century life? You can't. You can't. So the Ukrainians continue to make Crimea untenable for the Russians. They simply, look at all the Brits here correcting me on SAS. Nice, thank you. Or educating me, I should say. Why doesn't Ukraine go after Moscow airport, put it out of commission? Probably because a civilian airport is not an important target. It's hard to do these long-distance strikes inside Russia. It's not easy. And the Ukrainians do it with great effectiveness against targets that degrade Russia's ability to prosecute the war. Clearly, that is the goal. And they're doing they're doing a hell of a job. Lukey, I think that was the plan, but he doesn't have the cards. Trump just doesn't have the cards. As we saw, as we have seen. Trump doesn't have any cards. The only cards he has are tariffs on China and India to stop Russian oil sales. And he's got weapons to sell. But just to sell, that's all. How can Trump fly to Hungary? That's easy, in Air Force One. Right, Little Red. Every accusation is a confession. Every accusation is a confession. And so when he told Zelensky he had no cards, what he was really confessing was that he had no cards. Yeah, well, the tone has changed since February, boy. Hey, Carl. Yeah, I don't really know what's going on with Idaho and the Qataris. Now, Sean, that's interesting because I don't play bridge at all. I don't know anything about the game. But that's a term in bridge, is it? Do not know that. Isn't rubber a bridge term? I think that's the only bridge term I know, and I don't know what it means, by the way. Steve is awake. Who's Steve? Oh, Pete. Oh. I mean, you're not wrong. No, I'm not a gambler of any kind. I'm not a card player. Every time I have some friends who like to play poker, and when we play, they always have to write down what beats what for me. So I have a little cheat sheet. Gambling, I take chances in real life. I'll actually move to Ukraine during the war. But no, I don't want to take chances with my money at a table with cards. See, now Poland, Bulgaria, where's that list? And Romania are all ICC signatories. So that means he cannot possibly travel through any of those places. And how do you get to Hungary without going through any of those places, or Poland or Ukraine? It seems far less likely that Putin could get to Hungary than it would be a problem for the U.S. president. Right, exactly. Never gamble what you can't afford to lose. Yeah, I've been in Kyiv for 3 years now, almost 3 years. On those rare occasions, my cousin Michael used to be a professional fighter. And we would sometimes go to his matches in Atlantic City. And, you'd bring $100, you'd go to the casino. When it was gone, it was time to go to the bar. And that's all there was to it. That's as much of a gambler as I've been. Kolomia. I don't know where that is. I don't know what that is or where that is. Is that in Ukraine? And where are you from? Yeah, I agree, J-Boy. And because I can do math, I know that at the casino, your best odds are at the roulette table. You have about a 47% chance of winning. That's about the best odds you'll get in the casino. And so I always play roulette. Yeah, Pete, I'm with you. You put 10 pounds on red. If it doesn't hit, you put 20 pounds on red. If it doesn't hit, you put 40 pounds on red. And if you do that long enough, you will break even. Canadian, Ukrainian. Nice. All right, kids, it's about 3 minutes to the top of the hour. So I want to again thank June, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. I want to thank everybody who has joined the Patreon the last 2 weeks or so. I'll give you an update on that on Monday. I want to thank Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peters Peeps group, and of course the moderators, the best moderators on the Tickety Talk. Thanks, Guard. Thanks, everybody. I am going to get some rest. Judy, I'm looking forward to seeing you soon enough. Ooh, we have a correction. Edwin has a correction. Hungary announced it is leaving the ICC in June 2025, but it will take effect in June 2026. So again, how can Putin go there? All you need is one rogue guy to say you are under arrest, and you'll have an international incident on your hands. So I don't know. Hungary does not seem likely to me. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Valley Guy. Friend, Kisk region. Thanks, Pistol Pete. Thanks, Van. Thanks, Little Red. Thanks, Renvox. Thanks, Chrissy. All right, kids. I'm going to call it a night. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. It's a lot of good news today, and I couldn't let it go by. So very happy to be here. Thanks.